It got quiet all of a sudden, so that must be the signal to start. Well, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Library of Virginia, the Library of Virginia Foundation, and the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, I'm delighted to welcome you tonight to our annual Art and Literature, the Mary Lynn Kotz Award program. I'm Sandy Treadway, the director at the Library of Virginia, and it's just such a delight to be here in person with all of you. Tonight's program is the first event in the library's Literary Awards celebration weekend. So we start the weekend off really strong with tonight's program, featuring the winning author, and in this case authors, and book in the annual Art and Literature Award competition. This award is named in honor of Mary Lynn Kotz, an award-winning writer herself, and a woman who has devoted much of her life to writing about art, but in a way that makes it accessible to wide and general audiences. The idea for this award began in conversations back in 2011 with several of us at the library and the VMFA and writers who had a strong interest in art. We realized there was no existing award at the time or recognition for a literary work that had a work of art or an artist as its primary subject. So this juried award was launched in 2013 to recognize a book in any genre that exemplifies the best in this unique field. And the winners of this award to date comprise a very distinguished group of writers indeed. They include Orhan Pamuk, who was a Nobel Prize winner for his book, The Innocence of Objects, Catherine Kreuter-Ferranda, who is with us tonight. Where are you, Catherine? There you are, right there, for her book, The Embrace, Dawn Tripp for Georgia, Mary Gabriel for 9th Street Women, and many, many others. Many people have helped to make this award possible, but chief among them is Alex Nargis, director of this wonderful state crown jewel, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and Lee Separich, right there, who is the director of the library here at the museum and its special collections, and most importantly for us, the coordinator of the judging panel for the Art and Literature Award. We are so grateful to Alex and to Lee and to all here at the VMFA for ensuring that the Art and Literature Award is such a success. Author Catherine Neville, who is also with us tonight, right there on the end, was key in the creation and launch of this path-breaking award. And now it is my great pleasure to turn the microphone over to Lee Separich to introduce tonight's program. So please join me in thanking Lee and everyone here at the VMFA for all they do to make this award possible.
Hello, everyone. I get to do the fun part. I get to introduce our illustrious speakers. But first, I want to say a few things about the way tonight's program is going to go. We're going to have Patsy Rembert in conversation with Dr. Erin Kelly about the book up on the stage. And then after that, we're going to have a question and answer session. We'll pass around a mic. And then following that, we have a wine and cheese reception and a book signing. So I think you're going to want, if you don't already have copies of this book, you're definitely going to want to get it. And it's also available on Audible. So thanks, Sandy, for your introduction. And this is just a great award and a collaboration between two state agencies that's been very successful. We look forward to it because it's a smaller gathering of people in an intimate setting where we really get to dive into this one award, this one book, and hear the author's own words before we celebrate at the larger Virginia Literary Awards celebration, which is, a big gala. So this is a unique opportunity. I'd like to recognize one of our judges that's here tonight. Doug Litz has traveled from New York. He's, you want to stand up? He'll be there tomorrow night, but He's one of the people that read through 40 of these books. So I want to give him the credit that is due. So I want to talk about Mary Lynn before I introduce the authors. She's not able to join us tonight, and Sandy touched on it, but she's really the reason the award exists, and the group that included Catherine Neville wanted to honor her efforts that she made and her achievements as a journalist, writing about Robert Rauschenberg and George O'Keeffe. And she used to come to this award regularly, but she couldn't come tonight. So she's here with us in spirit. This year's winning book that you see on the screen, ta-da, Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South, has a foreword by Brian Stevenson. And we didn't know this, but it did win the Pulitzer Prize, so we weren't the first to discover it. We did not know that when we picked it, yeah. And there are many other accolades following this book, and we expect to see many more. Among them, Book List, Nonfiction Book of the Year, African American Literary Book Club, Nonfiction Bestseller, Best Book of the Year by NPR, Publishers Weekly, Book Page, Barnes & Noble, Hudson Booksellers, Art News Magazine, for which Mary Lynn Kotz wrote, so she would be pleased to hear that. I'm not sure if she knows that. Catherine, you can tell her. And it was longlisted for the Carnegie Medal of Excellence in Nonfiction. So it's a real winner. And so is the artist. It's Winfred Rembert, 1945 to 2021, was an artist from Cuthbert, Georgia, and his paintings have been exhibited in museums and galleries around the country. And he was recently cited as one of the century's most unique and visionary artists, chroniclers of Black American life, alongside such giants as Jacob Lawrence, Horace Pippin. His story is amazing and compelling. He survived a near lynching at the hands of law enforcement, spent 7 years on chain gangs, and decades later began his artistic career at the age of 51. So there's hope, for the rest of us if we haven't started. Well, maybe not all of us, but the younger ones. And the stories that are told are just so moving. And I just want to give Rembert's wife, Patsy, the credit that she deserves in encouraging him to put his memories down on paper and encouraging him to be an artist. I mean, none of this would have happened without her. And if you read the book, that comes through loud and clear. So she's a real superstar in this story, and we're really thankful that she's here tonight to speak with Erin Kelly about, her life with Rembert. Recently, Winfred was the subject of a documentary film. So, and there are many interviews on YouTube if you want to check those out. The stories that he tells give insight into his art and also address difficult subjects such as racial injustice, racial violence, and corruption in the justice system. But it's a love story ultimately, and you'll see that, like I just mentioned, it's a love story between him and his wife and his love for his family. I mean, they were together 46 years with 8 children, so that's commendable. I told her she was an overachiever today. So we're fortunate to have them here to talk to us. Dr. Erin Kelly is a professor of philosophy at Tufts University and received her PhD from Harvard University and her BA from Stanford. That's, very impressive credentials. In addition to being the co-author of Winfred Rembert's Pulitzer Prize winning memoir, Chasing Me to My Grave, another plug, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South, she is also the author of The Limits of Blame, Rethinking Punishment and Responsibility from Harvard University Press in 2018. And she writes and speaks about ethics and social justice, especially in connection with criminal law. So please join me in welcoming Erin and Patsy to the stage.
I got it. Yeah, I think I got it. I think I can make it there. All right. I can't do it real fast, but I'll get there.
All eyes are on you.
That's what's making me slow. Oh, maybe next time I come before you, I won't be hopping. You going around that way? Okay. Ooh, I should have followed you too. You go first. Okay. Uh-oh, it fell off again. Yeah. Yes, it fell off again. I don't know where to stay. Okay.
Such a pleasure to be here. It's a great honor to receive the Mary Lynn Kotz Award, especially because it acknowledges both art and literature. And when Winfred and I were writing the book, it was really part of the concept of the book that there would be a conversation between the art and his life story. So we constructed the book to really unfold as that kind of conversation and tell the stories behind the artwork. I'm so happy to be here with Patsy Rembert and Lee Sepperich. Thank you so much. And Sandra Threadway, thank you for your generous invitation and your introduction. And we're both really happy to be here.
We're thrilled to be here. And I'm just so appreciative that you looked at his book and took it in consideration. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I also would like to acknowledge Winfred Rembert Jr., Winfred's son, who's here, who's traveled here from New Haven. And we're really happy that he's here.
One of six.
One of six boys. And he'll.
Your favorite.
So we invite him to join in the conversation at any point, and he is available, I think, to answer questions afterwards if you'd like to speak with him. Yes.
All right.
So what we'd like to do is to tell you about the book, tell you about Winfred, his art and his life, talk about that a little bit. And this is Winfred. He was born in 1945. He died in 2021, sadly before the book was published, but very proud to have finished the book and to have achieved the dream of writing this book to tell his story. So we miss him. He would have been thrilled to receive this award. This would have just put him over the moon.
Yes.
So we will enjoy it for him and trust that he's looking down and enjoying this night together with us. So Patsy and I decided that we would start by just reading I'll read a couple of paragraphs from the preface to give you a flavor of Winfred's voice and to put the book a little bit in context in his words. And Patsy's going to comment on these paragraphs once I read them.
Yes. Okay.
Unless you want to read them.
No, I'm not going to make it.
Writing this book has been a lifelong dream of mine. Ever since I was released from prison, I have wanted to tell the story of me. I left Cuthbert, Georgia in chains. It was 1967. I got locked up as a nobody. Prison made sure I was still a nobody when, in 1974, I was released. Some people in Cuthbert never knew what happened to me. I want people, especially the people I knew, to understand what happened and why I spent 7 years on the chain gang. Even though I have wanted to tell my story for years, I was afraid to draw attention to what happened in Cuthbert, Georgia during my lifetime and to me. I was worried about whether people would believe me or care, and whether the real people I name might in some way or other retaliate. I wasn't sure how to talk about my search for my mother's love or the bond I feel with Patsy, but my time in this world is up, so there's no better time. This may be the perfect time.
Now, from her reading that, I've read the book maybe 3 or 4 times. I realized the anguish, the pain that he received, and how he wanted so badly to tell his story, but he only wanted to tell it to me. And the whole thing was that I felt like the world needed to hear it. The world needed to know about a Black man's suffering, especially the one that I loved. So I kept urging him, and it took some time. Around the dinner table, he would talk about some of the incidents. He had never really fully told the whole story of his life. He would only tell bits and pieces. But it was enough for me to know that there was something deeper, something more that he needed to say. And when he met Erin, they clicked. He felt comfortable enough to tell her a lot about his life. And she had the good fortitude to put it down in a way that he speaks to you from this book.
So he began telling his story many years before writing this book.
Yes.
Through his art. And you, Patsy, were the one who urged him to do that. Why did you think that art was the way in which he could communicate his story?
He was illustrating things that happened, and he was trying to make them acceptable. At first, he didn't think no one would even want to see anything he did, because he felt when you've been told you're nobody for all your life, you begin to believe it. And you think that whatever you're doing, no one would have any interest in. But I could see that if he could put down and illustrate different situations that had happened to him, somebody would want to see it. And that's how I finally got him to start it back. He could always draw, always. He was doing things for his kids, and he was doing stuff. He did a jacket for him, but he didn't feel like anybody else would be interested in anything he had to do. And I told him, when you die, that's gonna die with you if you don't put it down. I said, you got the perfect medium that will last. Do it on the level. And he did one picture for a friend of ours, and he sold the picture. And he said, oh my God, there might be something to this. And he got $300 for his first about 11 by 10, I think, picture. And his friend Phil McBlain asked him, said, can you do any more like this? And he said, yes. And then they went out and they bought leather, and he started from that. I said, well, do your life story, scenes from your life. And that's what he started doing.
So Patsy mentioned that he works on leather. So his medium was leather. He carved and tooled the leather, and then he dyed the leather. So trying to get it to advance.
Yes.
Oh, okay, here we go. So this is the first painting of Winfred's that I saw. I came across it online. I thought it was amazing. Just the composition, the musicality, everything about it. I just thought it was amazing. And I learned that it was done by an artist who was formerly incarcerated, and it was about his own experience. And I, as Lee mentioned, I'm a philosopher and I work on issues of ethics, and had become interested in criminal law. I was writing about criminal law and justice. And I wanted to hear what Winfred had to say about his experience and the story behind this painting, behind this series of paintings. And so we'll get into a little bit more about how he ended up in prison, but let me just read briefly a paragraph about this painting. And Patsy may want to comment on the title of this painting, but when I asked him to talk about sort of the prison experience behind the painting, he had a lot of interesting things to say, and here's just one moment in the book. He said, with my paintings, I tried to make a bad situation look good. You can't make the chain gang look good in any way besides putting it in art. Those black and white stripes look good on canvas. People can't really tell what they are until they get up close. They don't recognize those stripes as people until they take a real good look. That was my goal, to put it down so you couldn't understand it until you take a real up-close look. That tells you something about prison life. When you look at it from the outside, you can't see what's going on, but when you're up close, you realize what you're up against. So this painting is called All Me. And I wonder, Patsy, if you want to explain what that meaning of that is.
No, when he did this picture, he told me he was trying to capture how he felt. This picture have all those pictures, but they're all him. All of those people that you see, he said he had to try to be that in order to survive in the chain gang. He couldn't just be himself. He had to turn into and portray to be whatever the situation called. And so he felt like he had to be a lot of different people. And he did take on different personalities because of it. And that's why he called it All Me. All of those you see are him. And that is what he thought. He had to fit whatever mold that was coming along. If he had to be good, he would be good. If he had to be bad, if he had to fight, whatever the situation called for, he would fit that mold. And that's why he called it All Me.
I think it's amazing that he would be able to create this painting as such beauty and sensitivity about a subject that was so difficult and painful.
He would never tell me where he started. That was the whole thing. I wanted to know, where did he start drawing the picture? What end did he start on? He'd tell me, watch me. But I don't know where he started at on that picture. I just know when I saw it, it was just a mass of people. And he said it was him.
So this is the painting before he dyed it. So it gives you some sense of the texture of the painting, the carving. It almost has a sculptural quality, the paintings. And when you see them in the flesh, literally, they have a lot of texture. So this is a painting called On Mama's Cotton Sack. Winfred was born in rural Georgia and worked in the cotton fields with the woman who raised him. Her name was Lillian Rembert. She wasn't his birth mother. She was his great aunt. And if you look in the middle, the bottom of the painting, you'll see a little boy on a cotton sack. And that was Winfred being pulled through the field by Lillian as she worked. And they lived on the edge of the cotton field in a small wooden house. And this painting is called What's Wrong with Little Winfred? And the story behind the painting is that the girl on the porch holding him is his sister Lorraine. And the white sheet was a signal to Lillian to come and check on the baby if something was wrong with the baby. She told Lorraine, if anything's wrong with the baby, hang a sheet up and I'll come from the field. So this is called What's Wrong with Little Winfred? Yes. And what I want to do now is show a few of his paintings of the cotton field, which is a theme in his work. And these are paintings about a difficult situation of toiling. They're very beautiful paintings, but they speak to a situation that was a hardship for Winfred and others. And Patsy, I wonder if you can tell us about the title of this painting, and then I thought I would show some more slides, and you can just talk about, the experience in the cotton field that it depicts.
Well, now, this is a picture where you work from sun to sun. Actually, what time you're going to work, you say from cake to cake. And that means when you go, you can't see. When you come home, you can't see. You have to come home by the truck lights. And that was why he did that, so you could get an idea of the time frame in which they worked at that time. You couldn't see when you went to work, and you couldn't see when you come home. So he called it cake to cake.
This is another version of Caint to Caint. So talk about this, Patsy. This is Patsy's favorite painting.
This is my favorite because it is a picture from my life. It's as though he was standing in the field with me and decided he'd do this picture because this is the way it looked. Exactly. A guy would come down through the field riding on a horse to check to see what work you had done or where you were working. And he did that picture. And I just love it. I love it.
Green rose. Yes, please.
The reason he was doing the rose like that and putting the colors in it, he wanted you to take a look at it because the cotton field is beautiful when you're riding along watching and looking at it. It's not that beautiful when you're in it working, but it is truly beautiful. It is a beautiful sight to see all that cotton. And some of the sand is red. Some of the places have grass in between, so it was green. And he was trying to capture that where the onlooker would be interested in looking at the picture because of the colors that he used.
Winfred's memory was so sharp and vivid. He would close his eyes and just go back into these scenes and think about the colors and the feeling of it and all the details, and then he would represent it in his unique and remarkable way.
Now, this is a scene where women would have babies in the field and they would go right back to work. And you would put the dog to watch the baby. You wrap the baby up and you put him to the side or to her, and the dog would babysit. Make sure no snakes would come up around. If the snakes come around, the dog would either bark or the dog would take care of the snake. But the baby and the mother had to continue. She had the baby, and but I had a cousin. She had her baby in the field. She never quit working. She kept working. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. She had the baby, wrapped the baby up. I might have been about 7 or 8, and she kept working. She kept working.
So Winfred hated working in the cotton fields. And when he was a young teenager, he ran away from home in order to avoid working in the fields. And he ran into town, down to Hamilton Avenue, which was the Black neighborhood in Cuthbert, Georgia. And he discovered all of these Black establishments, juke joints, pool halls, shoe shine parlors, places where people would gather. There was a sense of community, there was fun. And these are incredibly precious memories to him. He elaborates them in the book. And I think these were memories that sustained him throughout difficulties in his life, including in prison and other moments in his life of low point. So this is Hamilton Avenue, one of his favorite places.
A young boy, how he found out about Hamilton Avenue, because he didn't know that Black people had establishments back in the day. He thought all of them worked in the cotton fields. But he had a friend named Duck that introduced him to Hamilton Avenue. And there was a lot of people on that street that took a liking to Winfred. And some of them took him in and gave him jobs, little odd things to do. And he didn't go back to the cotton field after that. He started to, his eyes was open that there's more to life than the cotton field, which he didn't know before then, because his mother was very terrified of white people. And she did what she was told. And she was trying to get Winfred to do the same thing. Whatever you be told, that's what you do. And this was a refuge for him once he found this place.
So along Hamilton Avenue, there were, as I mentioned, different establishments, juke joints. This is Homer Clyde's place where people would gather to play pool, eat lunch, dance. Winfred loved dancing. He was by his own testimony to me, he was a great dancer. But we'll have Patsy's opinion on that.
Yes.
Was he?
Yes, he was a good dancer and a great singer. Great singer.
Here's a local band, Ben Shorter's band, kind of swing band that was popular in that part of the South. And Ben Shorter was from Cuthbert, and they played in town. They played in town until he got involved with the civil rights movement and then was blacklisted from performing in town.
You know, he played only white establishments. He was a jazz player, and he would play music. And these were places that they couldn't ordinarily go in, but he could entertain in them. But once he became part of the civil rights movement, they blackballed him, and he couldn't do no more music or play for anyone there.
Well, he must have made it to the black part of town sometimes, because this looks like people dancing to his music. So this is the Dirty Spoon Cafe. Winfred said they wouldn't let kids in this place, but he looked through the window and he learned dance moves by watching the dancers through the window, and he had a lot of admiration for the bright colors people wore. Winfred's someone who loves color.
Oh my God, we love color.
So Winfred got a job working in Jeff's pool hall. Jeff was a local fellow who took a liking to Winfred and hired him to work in the pool hall. Winfred slept in the back of the pool hall and worked there during the day. And it was at this time that he began to develop a political consciousness, because it was the time the civil rights movement came to this little town, and Black people gathered in Jeff's cafe to talk about ideas and the movement and what was going on around this
Playing
part
with
of
strategies and stuff, things that they was gonna try to do to make things different.
And Winfred got very interested in this, and he wanted to become a part of this. So he ended up going to some demonstrations nearby in Americus. This was probably around between 1963 and 1965 was when the Americus movement was very active, and it was difficult situation for the protesters. It was violent. It often turned violent, sometimes quite brutally so. So Winfred went to Americus and he participated in a demonstration. This is a picture of the demonstration, that this fateful day for him when the demonstration turned violent. And Winfred, to escape two white men who were chasing him with shotguns, ran down an alley where he saw a car with the keys in it, and he jumped in the car and drove away. So now he's committed a crime. He stolen a car. He drove it back to Cuthbert and was arrested some days later, for stealing this car, and taken to the local jail, where he was locked up for over a year, almost 2 years, with no charges that he knew of, certainly no lawyer, no visitors, and he became frustrated, and he plugged the John in his cell with toilet paper, flushed it, and flooded the place. And the deputy sheriff came back into the cell and began to beat him up. And Winfred had been told by Lillian Rembert, his mama, if white folks hit you, don't hit them back.
Just take it.
And so that was going to be his strategy. But as the beating continued, he changed his mind, and he struggled with the deputy sheriff. He ended up taking the sheriff's gun away from him, and he locked the deputy sheriff in the cell and fled. So now he's on the run, in big trouble,
That's a death sentence in itself. And he went to a civil rights worker's house that he didn't know it very well, but he knew the guy, and the guy had went to the store. He said he walked up to the door and he knocked on it, and she opened the door and said, "What's wrong?" And he told her that he had just locked the deputy sheriff up and he needed some help. She invited him in, made him comfortable, gave him a cup of coffee, went in the next room and called the police. She told him that her husband was going to Jacksonville and that he might could get a ride with him. And he waited. He said then he missed her. he couldn't hear in the house any longer, so he got up looking for her. And then he said he peeped out the front door, and it was just a yard full of white people with guns and sticks and stuff, and she was nowhere to be found. And he said they bust open the door and asked him where was the deputy's gun, and he threw it down on the floor. He said when the gun hit the floor, they started all over him, just beating him every which way, you know. Everybody started hitting him and beating him. He said he didn't think he was gonna make it from there alive. But after they got through beating on him as much as they wanted to, they took him to the jail and to decide what they was gonna do with him, which was to kill him for sure. But they just kept him in jail again.
Mm-hmm. He thought he would be killed. He was nearly lynched.
Yeah. After that, I thought you was going to show another picture. Yeah, that is the picture. They marched him around the town. But first, let me go back. They beat him. Then they took him for a ride out into this country. And when they got him out there, the guy that he had locked up, they had him hung up by his ankles, made him strip off all his clothes. And the guy come with a hawkbill knife to cut him. He's gonna take his private parts. And another white guy, which had a lot of influence, stopped him and said, no, we can do something else with him. There's a lot more better things we can do with this nigger. And they cut him down, they threw him back in the back of the car, and they brought him back to the police station. And there where he sat for over 2 years, almost 2.5 years he sat there. So
Then they took him to court, and he was sentenced to 27 years in the Georgia prison system. He spent 7 years on chain gangs and was released unexpectedly to him in 1974.
now at this trial, he never saw the papers, he never saw no paperwork to say how many years he got or what he was charged with. The judge just told him and gave him some time. Said, nigga, today I'm gonna give you some time. So he gave him time for different things that he was charging him with. And he said he counted up, it was 27 years. But that's what the judge gave him. He didn't have no lawyer. He didn't have nobody to say whether he was innocent or guilty or to plead his case in any way. And they locked him up.
So this painting is called Georgia Justice. So that takes us back to the chain gang where we started. This is another version of All Me.
He did about 5 of those pictures, I think, because it was replaying in his head what he had to do and the personalities that he had become in order to live. So he did about 5.
The conditions on the chain gang were incredibly brutal. So I think these paintings, I can go back to it, really represent, kind of that psychological fragmentation and the threat to his sense of self. And now here he is, as an older person looking back and putting it back together as a painting. It's a remarkable achievement. So here they are digging ditches.
Yeah.
Cracking rocks. Angry inmates. Yeah. And this is a self-portrait. Winfred, his self-portrait around the time he met Patsy. So, I don't know, is this what he looked like?
Yeah, somewhat, only better.
And this is Patsy's yard.
Yeah.
So tell us about how he came to your yard and
I was washing clothes, and he walked up in the yard, and he said, excuse me, miss. And I looked back and I saw he was a prisoner, and I ran in the house and told my dad, there's a prisoner in the yard. And my father came to the door and he said, sir, we just only want some water. We working on the bridge the rain had washed away the bridge and they was there to fix it. And my mother asked him, said, son, y'all working down there? He said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, come up here at 12 and I'll fix lunch for y'all. I'll fix dinner for y'all. And he started coming to the yard and we just looking at one another, and Mama stopped after she figured out that we had eyes for each other. She stopped because I burned up a whole pan of bacon just looking at it. You know, I couldn't turn it. It was there, but I just couldn't turn it. I couldn't turn it. And she figured that, you know, once she saw that, she just stopped cooking for him. She said, well, I'm not going to have time anymore to cook for y'all. So, but
So
that didn't stop.
they weren't too happy about you
No.
being interested in a prisoner at first, right?
No.
Well, so what turned them around?
Well, at first, Winfred had to get my attention to write him. So he would pile dirt up in the road when my school bus would come along, and the bus couldn't get by until he moved it. And he would get down off his machine and start asking me, girl, write me. Come on, now, write me. I don't know nobody, and write me. And I wouldn't say anything to him. And so finally one day the bus driver told him, so just tell him something, because he's making me late every day. Lie to him, even if you don't write him, tell him you will. So I told him I would, and we started writing each other. Now the thing about writing him, I couldn't write him from home and mail that letter, put it in the mailbox. I had to write the letter at night, put it in the school mail so it would get mailed. I would have to wait. My school bus got me home at 3:00. The mailman run at 3:15. So I was the one getting the mail all the time. And I would take the letters that he write me and go down in the woods. I did a lot of hunting at that time. And I would take the gun and take the letter and go down in the woods and read it. And so it was a secret. He was a secret for almost a year, maybe a little longer, but he was my secret. Finally, one of the boys at this time, I had suitors. So there was more than one young man coming to see me. He wasn't taking me nowhere, but he could come talk. So this particular Sunday, I had went over to my grandmother's house to comb my hair, which lived before you get to the camp. My grandmother lived on the corner. And I would comb my hair, braid it up, and ask her, can I go to the store? She was a little bit more relaxed in letting me do things. She said, yes, baby, bring me back a knee high. And I would go to the store, go all the way around. I just wish I could show you. And come back down to the camp. A friend of mine, her name is Margaret Nelson, would meet me there, and we would go up to the camp. So finally one Sunday I was going to see him, and one of the boys that was coming to see me, my mother had sent him over to pick me up, and he caught me going. And he decided he'd tell my parents that I was going to the camp to see a prisoner. And that killed that secret.
So tell him what happened when your dad read his letters.
Oh my God. My father had said that he'd rather see me dead than to stoop so low. But he intercepted the letter. This is further on down the line. He intercepted the letter that Winfred had wrote me, and he took me to see him. After reading that letter, he said, I didn't know he was reading it. He told me, he said, girl, put on something, make yourself look decent. And I did what he said. And then my mother took me out to the camp to see Winfred. And he told Winfred, he said, look, I'm going to bring my daughter out of here. He said, but I don't want you to be disrespectful with her. He said, I won't. But I had quit eating. I wouldn't eat, so I had got sick. And they knew it was because I couldn't see him. So after he read the letter and everything, he wanted to meet Winfred to see what kind of guy he thought he was. But before Winfred and I married, he had to be interviewed by my 3 brothers. And they found him to be okay. So, you know, it's just, when you read the book, you'll see a lot.
So here's Winfred and Patsy in 1974. a few months after he was released from prison and just before they got married,
It's 2 days before we married.
standing on the road outside her house in Ashburn, Georgia.
Yeah.
So this was the beginning of the love story that Lee was talking about earlier, which is woven throughout the book, very moving, including a chapter in Patsy's voice, bringing her perspective into the book.
And everything that I have on, he's a terrific clothes buy, he bought. And he brought it, he was in Rochester, he brought it back from Rochester. And for me, I don't know how he knew my size, but
So here's the
yes.
The first dance.
The first dance. Now, I got to tell him a story about this. I had never been out all night. And when we first got married, he took me to this Caribbean bar, and they was open all night. That's the dance. And then after we finished dancing, he said, come on. We walked outside, and he let me stay there until the sun was coming up, because I had never stayed outside my home, been out all night. So he kept me out all night just so I could get the experience of being out all night.
So here's Winfred and Patsy,
Many
some years later.
Yeah.
Some years later. And there's Winfred, his sense of humor and liveliness.
Pointed at me.
And just, how wonderful with this award to sort of recognize the power of art and literature together. And I think a lot about Winfred's art and its invitation to the viewer to come into this world, to ask questions, to think and understand, and to learn about the past with some empathy and understanding for the people who had to go through these experiences that he shared with them. And I don't know if you want to talk, Patsy, about others in the South, but sometimes.
Listen, Winfred's book is not just about him. He's telling the story of his life, but it fits the criteria of so many others who had to deal with the same but they didn't live to tell it. And I used to tell Winfred that the Lord allowed him to live so he could tell the story of how young Black men were treated and the pain and suffering they had to go through with no one that they could go to. There was no one they could tell. Nothing could be done about the way they was being treated. I feel, now that's my belief. I believe I was raised as a Baptist, so that's my upbringing. A lot of you may not believe in that, but I do. And I believe that the Lord saved him to be able to tell the story of his life, which touches on a whole lot of other young Black men, people like Emmett Till. He could never tell what happened to him. But my husband's book give you some insight on the things that was said and the things that was done before they hanged you, before they did all the things that they did to a young Black man at that time, and how apprehensive, I would think that, how scared they was of the young Black man at that time, and how he was treated because he had no one to talk to, no one he could go and tell. The judge was the uncle to the sheriff. The sheriff was married to the sister. Nobody you could go to and say, I'm being treated wrong. And they didn't know, like we go around and elect, they appointed whoever they wanted to be sheriff, whoever they wanted to be, and it was all family all the time. They grew up with each other. So you didn't have anyone that you could go and tell nothing to. So
I think this is Winfred, seeking some sense of justice.
yes.
To be able to tell this story and have people read it, think about it. And so we'd be happy to answer your questions, but I just wanted to invite Winfred Rembert Jr., if you'd like to share any thoughts about your father as an example to you. You don't have to, but if you feel like it, I just wanted to invite you.
Good evening, thank you, Dr. Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I asked them not to bring up your butt.
Yeah, something like that.
just want to comment on my mom for a second. The first trip we took together was to Paducah, Kentucky. It was my first plane ride. That plane ride stalled. I was 16. When I had 47, that was 30 years ago. Same thing happened on our way here. Same thing. We got stuck and delayed. Same thing. This is such a beautiful woman. And without her, my dad wouldn't go as far as he did. So the first example, as in fathers in here, is what you say and what you do. What he didn't tell me was, what he showed me was picking the right wife is a generational decision. My dad has moved on, and we're still here talking about it. I'm here talking about him. Couldn't do that. She could sour me on him. There's a lot of times that happens, but we're here now, and he's passed on, and we're still carrying on his message as his oldest son. He's got Winfred Rembert III out in California. He's a researcher. Everything I have as a father was modeled after him. I can't even take any credit other than doing it. Then about him personally, to take a negative is what he would say and turn it into a positive. And as he would say it, I'll say how he says, I don't give a shit what happens to you. You find a way. You find a way. And that's what he had done over. When he doubted himself, she was right there to pick him up. And when he sold that first picture, he says, I'm taking everybody out. We're all going out, which is another word. We're going through the drive-through somewhere, and we're going to get something to eat. Now, the Whopper was 99 cents. There's 8 people. So he bought 7 Whoppers. So, shoot, we're going to eat good tonight. We're going to eat good. We went, he came home, he took a knife and chopped them in half. We had half a Whopper to each of us. That was the most disappointing thing in my life. I thought we was going to eat the whole Whopper. I thought I was getting a whole Whopper. I got a Whopper Junior. But I watched this man. If that didn't happen to him, he wouldn't have met my mother. Without people saying no to him, he wouldn't have. And my mom encouraging him. He was doing comic book stuff. He was afraid to put his actual stuff on leather because saying no to a medallion, saying no to something he wrote as a comic book, whatever, there's other people doing it. But saying no to his artwork was saying no to him. And he took that very personal. So it took my mom some coaxing before he finally decided to put himself on the leather. So everything you see are ideas. Him and my mother came together and put those ideas together. And I'm so grateful to him for the life he made for me, my brothers. Our feet aren't as heavy as his was. They weren't as heavy. And he had to put up with a lot of stuff. People showing us pictures, walking out, laughing at him. And it hurt him. And I can see how much it hurt him. And then to see the success, to see him get right here with the success, and him to kind of fall at the end just hurts us. It's a year and a half, Pulitzer, pictures, every literary, hopefully some kind of Hollywood thing, and he's not here for any of it, but his family is still here. My parents kept us together. My mom kept us together. And because of that, we're able to share our life story with all of you. So thank you.
If anybody has any questions, we can take a few now.
I don't really have a question, but I found this book maybe when it just came out and it was here in this gift shop. What I kept going back to after I read it was the things that happened were not that long ago. Right. Those cotton fields and all of those things, I mean, that's my lifetime. So the whole story is impressive, but it's now. It's not yesteryear. It wasn't 1860. So I think we need to bear that in mind as we go through. But thank you so much for being here and doing this.
I have a very simple question. It may seem dumb. How large are the paintings?
They really vary in size.
Because the leather is so limited in size, I was wondering how they
So
look
he-
giant. They
He
look
would go
huge.
and buy, a hide, and then he would cut a canvas as large as he could cut it from a single hide. So some of these paintings are, like 3 feet by 4 feet. They're very impressive in size. That's one thing you can't get from the book, is the experience of the size of the paintings.
Some of them were 6 feet and 3 feet wide, some 7 by 7. He did small, large pictures, just whatever leather he had, he used it. And whatever left over, he used it. So he,
Hi. You're an amazing storyteller. What you've said tonight, it's been a really remarkable story. I wonder if you could go into a little bit more detail about your father's reaction to the letter.
oh my God.
What did he see that turned him around?
Well, after I found out that he had read it, he said, I just got to know, do he mean any of this stuff that he's saying? But I didn't know at the time that he had read the letter until after I saw Winfred.
So what did he say in the letter that?
Oh, he was talking about what he was going to do for me and where we was going to live and how much he loved me. It was a love letter. And my father just wanted to know, did he mean all the stuff that he was saying?
And if he did,
Yeah.
then he's a special guy.
Yeah, because now, before this, see, there's a before and after story. I had spoke with my father about, but he didn't give me no answer when I talked to him. I told him, I said, Dad, there's people walking around free, need to be locked up. I didn't know what Winfred had done, but I didn't feel like it could be any better than some of the people I knew that didn't go to jail. And they should have been in jail, but they weren't. It all depended on who they worked for, whether or not they did any time in jail for anything they done. And I assumed that Winfred didn't have nobody that he worked for that would get him out of whatever trouble he was in. I didn't know what he had done. I just didn't think it was no worse than anything else somebody else had done, because I knew people I would have put in jail and threw away the key. But because of who they worked for, they didn't have to spend no time. Some of them didn't even go to jail. They'd be right back out in the field the next day working, flying. And I just felt like Winfred was one of the unfortunate people who didn't have anybody to speak for him. And I was right in a sense. But I didn't know Winfred. And I didn't know what he did. And I didn't care what he had done. I liked him when I saw him and his letters. I fell in love with his letters, which connect me to him. And that was it. That was it.
We included a couple of the letters in the book, so you could read them, and they're written in this beautiful script. Winfred had just learned to write. He was taught how to read and write by a fellow prisoner. He had been taken out of school to work in the cotton fields, so he was illiterate at the time he was incarcerated. So he was drawing these beautiful words that he had just learned how to write, and saying beautiful things with them.
And there's one more thing. My husband was not formally educated, but he educated himself. Everything, once he knew how to read, he told me his brain wanted to know more, he said. And every book he come across, he would read it. He took a book of a car that he needed to fix the motor in, took the motor all the way apart, put each piece down, and put the motor back together, and the car worked. He had no training. And now that was something else that he did. He started fixing cars after reading that book. He He just had an inquisitive mind and he would try to do anything. So that's how some of the times he would make money. He would fix people's cars and had no training in it. He taught himself. He was a self-taught, self-educated person.
Hi, I have two questions. First, is his work exhibited any place? And second, you said that you found him by seeing his pictures online, but can you talk more about how you got to meet him and decide to write about him?
Sure. He's represented by a couple of galleries in New York. Fort Gansevoort had a show of his work last year, but it's not currently exhibited. And the Adelson galleries also have exhibited his work many times over the years. And some pieces have been acquired by museums. There in the High Museum in Atlanta has one of his paintings. The Yale University Art Gallery bought a series of 3 paintings, a triptych about a lynching. And there are a few placed in other museums. I think Winfred was saying that the National Gallery bought a painting recently. So there are not a lot in museums. Most of his work was acquired by private collectors, but there are paintings out there that we hope will be placed in museums. So I contacted Winfred when I got interested in his art and his story and asked him whether I could interview him. And so I went to New Haven, I interviewed him, and I found him to be remarkably interesting, thoughtful, and that he had this story that was really worth listening to and that he had a lot to say. So I invited him to come to my university. We had an event to talk about his art and his life. And I stayed in touch with him, and then he told me that he was looking for somebody to help him to write the book, write his memoir. So I went to New Haven, I interviewed him, transcribed parts of the tapes, and then I would go back and read it out loud to him. So we did a lot of reading, and that would spark a lot of conversation, further reflections, elaborations. I would ask questions, he would go more into it. So we went through like cycles of each chapter to get it right, to get it to be the way that he wanted it to be. And it's all told in his voice and from his perspective in conversation with the artwork. So it was a multi-year collaborative process. It took about 2 years to do the interviews in person, and then we were shut down by the pandemic, but fortunately we made it through the last chapter and had the book, and we could finish some of the edits in the subsequent year over the phone. So it was complete by the time he died. But most of it was done from 2018 March to 2020.
Now, there's one more thing I would like to say. I don't know what you want to know about him, but whatever it is that you want to ask it. Whatever you want to know about him that I can tell you, don't have no holdback, because this is the only way, because I can talk about him all day. I lived with him for 46 years. I know him for 50. But if it's a specific thing that you want to ask me. I'll be delighted to answer as best I can. So don't hold back on asking questions that you want to know something, because that's the only way you're going to know him, is if you ask the question.
Thank you so much for taking this question. How do you not be bitter? Is it your faith? Is it the strength of your marriage? Is it your family life? How did this not eat the inside of you and your family?
Look, I had a love for him. Now, I got to go back and explain some. He held no animosity. I did. And I still got a little chip. But he would always tell me, honey, that's what he'd be trying, when he'd explain things, he would say, honey, it's too hard to walk around with a frown on my face. And he said, I have to smile. He said, because that brings joy into my heart. I can't undo what they done, but I don't have to let it hang me down and hang. He said, I just can't do it. So he had no animosity, but I'm gonna tell you, and the lady that turned him in, I looked for her. Because I felt like.
Yeah, Patsy
I
Spears,
felt
you'll
like
find
when
that if you read the
She
book.
didn't want to help him. Just said, move on, I can't help you. Why invite him in and then call the police on him? Yes, if I could have found her, I would have hit her. So I can't say that I don't know what this, I'm angry that you could do this to a person and never say, hey, I'm sorry. You could treat a person so bad and never come back to that person and say, I'm sorry. He did a show in his hometown. This guy was in a wheelchair. He told my husband, I don't care how famous you get, you still a nigga. How can you? And my husband just walked away from him. So I don't want to be that harsh, but I ain't got no love for that guy. You know, I might have would have pushed him off the cliff if he'd have been on it. He'd have been close. I'm a little different from my husband. I don't want to be, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I still got a little anger because I loved him so much.
So Winfred was not a bitter person, remarkably, considering what he went through, and he had a lot of resources within himself to think about things and turn the picture into something else as a way of coping with it. But he did suffer from a lot of trauma. Yes. And the reason we call the book Chasing Me to My Grave is that in his dream, he would have these dreams at night where he was being pursued by people who wanted to beat him up or police. And he'd wake up in the middle of the night, fighting, literally fighting. Yeah. And he said he thought they'd be chasing him to his grave. So the trauma wasn't resolved, but he found ways to express himself that were just kind of marvelous and almost mind-boggling. And he wasn't an angry person.
Yeah, and when he was all about love. He wanted people. He would ask questions to make people think about themselves. And where I remember once he did a lecture, and he asked everybody in there how many had a black friend. A lot of people raised their hand. He said, you shouldn't do that. And they want to know why. He said, because you should say, I have a friend. Whether they black or white, you don't have to identify who they are or what race they are. They're your friend. So he would do a lot of trick questions. He would ask a lot of trick questions to get you to think about yourself and what your line of thinking is on. He wanted you to think of the next person as a person, not a color, not a race, but a person. And that's the abstract that he was trying to reach people, to get them to see that we are all the same and that we can love one another without the hatred. And so that was what he was trying to achieve.
Okay, we have one more person with a question, and then if anybody has extra questions, you can ask them at the book signing table, because we could be here all night, couldn't we?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming. My favorite painting was the portrait of both of you.
Oh.
I thought it expressed, like you said, a lot of love.
Yeah.
Just obviously, he's a genius artist. And I can tell he was like a lot of fun to be around, and probably he was able to resolve a lot through his work as an artist. And I want to know, was he looking at other artists that influenced him, such as Jacob Lawrence or anybody like that?
No, not the influence.
Oh my goodness.
The paintings that you see here, the colors they are from him.
Well, that's amazing to me, because if he wasn't looking at Jacob Lawrence, then
No.
I'm just totally overwhelmed by his work. So thank you for doing this.
He didn't even know about those artists until he started drawing.
That's really
he knew
amazing.
nothing about the art world, nothing.
Well, you're obviously a good advocate for his work, and I'm not sure he could have done it without you.
I want
So
to tell
thank
you,
you.
if you ever see this cartoon, he drew these. They call them the biker dogs. What is it, Junior? The biker dogs that he did, the comic, and they took that and they made a cartoon out of it. He got nothing for it, but that is his work. Whenever you see that, it's Doberman. The Dobermans or Bachman, whatever it is. But he did those and he sent it in, and they was to send him a reply back. They didn't, but they made a cartoon out of it, but he got nothing for it.
Well, that happens to a lot of artists. So, but I'm so happy this book is here tonight, and I can't wait to get it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your talk. So please join us for some wine and cheese. And if you're so inclined, you'll be able to buy a book and ask more questions and get it signed.